October 15th, 1981, the Oakland Coliseum, the Oakland Athletics versus the evil empire, the New York Yankees. Now, Rickey Henderson is up to bat. You remember Rickey? Low stance when all of a sudden, George Henderson, he's just a fan. He stands up, and George Henderson would carry a drum and a drumstick, and he would make noise, and he would try to bring some goodwill to an arena or to the Coliseum. He had short jean shorts. He had this bright yellow tight shirt. Here's a picture of him right here. And he loved the Athletics. And this is what he started to do. He looked over at a section, and he said, "Stand up, sit down, stand up, sit down." And they started to do it, because that's what you do when George yells at you. And then he goes to another section, "Stand up, sit down." And he goes to this one, "Stand up, sit down, stand up, sit down." And all of a sudden, this was the beginning of the wave. Now, if you go to YouTube, you can look at this. All of a sudden, you got Rickey Henderson up to bat, and this starts happening. And it just goes around and around and around. And the announcers are like, "I don't know what is going on right now." It's so good to see that the fans are bringing the energy back to the ballpark. You know, they don't even know what to do. But it was so beautiful. And one person rallied an entire crowd of people to bring some good and to spur their team on. Well, this idea has its genesis thousands and thousands of years ago. See, there was this person, and their central job was whenever something profound was about to happen, they were the ones who were going to run and tell the people. So one day this man would be standing outside the delivery room in the royal palace, and the door would open, someone would whisper in his ear, and he would take off running, sprinting as fast as he could to the town square where the people would be gathered. And he would proclaim the good news. The queen had a baby, and the place would go nuts. And then someone would yell out, "Was it a boy or a girl?" "I don't know." And he'd run back. He'd come back, "It was a girl," and the place would go nuts. The same person would be out on the battlefield. All he was doing was waiting. He's waiting for the commanding officer to come to him and tell them, "We won." They'd come, they would whisper in his ear, and he would take off running. Imagine you're a mother and your son's at war. Your spouse and your husband is at war. And you're running as fast as you can, and you get there, and inside the marketplace, there's thousands of people, and you proclaim, "Hail to the victors, we won!" And the place would go crazy. Now, in the Roman culture, this person was known as an evangelion, someone who brought good news. If you think about this, we live in a world right now where there is so much negativity. So much bad news. So much news that's driven by fear and different kinds of phobias. News outlets that like to tell stories centered around gossip and around celebrities' failures. Our world is desperate for good news. And so Paul, in 2 Timothy 4:5, he says 6 words to Timothy. And he co-opts a word that we use by the Romans and by different countries, and he begins to say, "This is going to be our job, Timothy. This is what I want you to do for the rest of your life." 2 Timothy 4, verse 5 says this, "Timothy, do the work of an evangelist." Now, right now, do the work, Timothy, of an evangelion. Be someone who bears good news, someone who brings and proclaims good news. And I know some of you right now, let's just be honest, you just heard that word evangelist and you're like, "I'm done, check out." You think of big hair, bad preaching. You think of someone with a large sign and a bullhorn screaming and yelling. But can you just for a few moments come with me on a journey to redeem and reclaim and restore the innocence and the beauty of this word? This is our word. This is what our world needs. And what I want you to see is in this verse, when Paul's writing, he's saying, Timothy, do. And in the original language, this word do is an action that never stops or ceases. This is something that you will do for the remainder of your life. Do the work. And this word work is to take the gospel, the good news, and actually put it in action. Not just speak about it, but live it. He's going, Timothy, never stop doing and putting the gospel, the good news, into action. This verse has become like a mantra to me, my own personal mission statement, an anthem that when I wake up, I proclaim these words. And my job, my role is to make the good news my life's work. And that's my prayer for every one of you. That you would decide today to make the good news your life's work. And in a world filled with all of the negativity, in a way in which this word evangelion has been co-opted, I want us to return back to the primary purpose of this word. And for us to bring and to make the good news our life's work. Now, you got to think about this. The good news meets a need. People who are really good at actually making the good news their life's work, you know what they're even better at? Noticing needs, being aware of the ache, perceiving the pain, seeing the struggle and suffering, because what good news desperately wants to do is to meet a need. And so, today, I want to teach you how you can make the good news your life's work by covering 4 bases, 4 need bases. The first base that you've got to cover is a relational need. Every time I walk into a restaurant, go into a coffee shop, I walk into a local hardware store, go into my son's school, walk in my neighborhood, I'm thinking about these 4 needs, and I'm begging God for helping me to cover these bases. And the first need is a relational need. Every person has needs. You know, there's 9 million people in Chicagoland, 9 million people. 9 million needs that people have. And when we make the good news our life's work, we individually look for opportunities to meet someone's need, but we also recognize that we, as the local church, as Willow, we have so much as a church that can help meet a need. Remember in John chapter 4, Jesus finds himself in Samaria and he's sitting around a well and he begins a conversation. He doesn't start with some spiritual need. He begins to witness to this woman's need. And begins to engage in a conversation. He begins to hear about her story and her past. He doesn't judge her. He doesn't label her. But through that, God begins to move in such mighty and powerful ways. I experienced this up close a couple weeks ago. I have 2 interns this summer, and I took them to Southern California with me. And we had a Saturday off before a whole full Sunday of teaching at a couple different churches and conferences. And I decided to take them to Barnes & Noble, and I said, hey, I will buy you 1 book each. You are what you eat, and you are what you read, so read up. And so we find ourselves walking in to this Barnes & Noble. I'm with one intern on one aisle, and the other intern goes to the next aisle to begin looking at books. And all of a sudden, I hear this 20-year-old intern begin a conversation. And you know what he says? He goes, excuse me, are you finding what you're looking for? What an interesting question. And then I hear the response. This woman says, no, not really. I'm looking for a book on grieving. And the 20-year-old intern says, why are you grieving? And she says, recently, our 22-year-old son passed away unexpectedly. And my husband and I, we really don't know how to process through what we're feeling, and we just needed some help. And so I'm here at a Barnes & Noble looking for a book. And at this moment, my 20-year-old intern's like, wait, I'm way outside of my pay grade right now. I don't know what to do. But he's like, let me see. Let me look. And he's like, I want to help you find the right book. And he starts looking through the aisle and the shelves. And then he walks over to me and goes, hey, do you know any good books? And I remembered a Colors of Goodbye, written by one of our very own, September Vaudry. It was about her and her husband's journey through their own grief of losing their daughter. And so we go, and I look through the aisle and the shelf to find it, and it's not there. And we begin this conversation with this woman, and she actually trusts me, and she hands me her phone, and I say, hey, let me just type it in. I type it into her phone. I said, spell out the last name, spell out the title. I said, just do me a favor, buy this book on Amazon. I really believe it will bless you. She says, okay. Well, we're in the next aisle over now. She's followed us. And so I decide to say, hey, can we just pray for you? She's like, I would really like that. And so we pray, the four of us, in Barnes & Noble. And when we say amen, my other intern, who hasn't said a word the entire time, goes, there's the book. And we're like, what? Oh my goodness, there's the book. Out of order, in the wrong aisle, in the wrong religion. And so we just pull it out, and we're like, here you go. And the woman just starts to weep. And you know what she says? I feel like God sees me in my pain, even here in a Barnes & Noble. And I was like, you are correct. God sees you, and God is with you. And please, please read this book. But as I'm walking out, I asked my 20-year-old intern, I'm like, hey, how did you start that conversation? And he was like, well, I saw that the woman was looking in the section of books that were under death and grieving, and I just felt like God whispered to me to strike up a conversation. And so I think that's where I'm going to go for the next week, just be in Barnes & Noble and be the pastor of that section right there, strike up conversation. But do you understand that? He saw someone. He noticed a need, and he brought a conversation, and all of this redemptive potential came rushing in, and someone who was hurting felt seen by a living and present God. This is good news. And what we have to see are the opportunities where we can meet relational needs and bring good news. Recently, I saw someone that I've known for a while, and I saw his hand, and I said, hey, where's your ring? Did you lose it again? Just being a little punkish. And he said, no, I took it off. I said, oh, why? And he couldn't even say it. He just said, my wife and I just in different houses now. I was like, oh man, I'm so sorry. What happened? He's like, I really messed up. I just really, really messed up. And it just led to this conversation where I said, well, have you heard about Restore? I was like, yeah, I've heard of it. I was like, do you think your wife would go with you? It's going to be hard work, and it's going to address some of the stuff that you've done. But man, if you do this right, and there could be some incredible growth. And by the grace of God, she said yes. And to this day, they're back in one house, and he's wearing a ring. And so I say this story because you have to understand that there are relational needs that you individually can meet, but there's relational needs that our church can help meet. You think about people who are drowning in debt. I know a number of people who were $30,000 in debt, and they showed up on a Wednesday night to go to FPU. And over the course of 9 weeks, actually got a handle on the insanity of their finances. And freedom came, and now they're debt-free. That's good news. I know people who were drowning in addiction, and they showed up never before on this campus, but someone brought them to recover. And they sat, and they went through the steps, and they ended up having these incredible conversations in community, and they met Christ and Jesus. Why? Because someone noticed a relational need. And everywhere you go, every person you come across, they have a need. And I'm asking you, do you see it? Are you aware of the ache? Do you notice the need? Do you perceive the pain? Because that's where people are desperate to see good news, to help them with that. The second base I'm always trying to cover is the physical need. In the very beginning, God, when he creates the garden, he actually entrusts it to the man and the woman. The scriptures say, be responsible of this land. Take care of it. God was entrusting it to us. And we know that the first two sons They got into a little bit of a battle, and one killed the other, and God simply said, hey, where's your brother? Where's your brother? And the truth is, since that question, for many of us, we can't answer it. Where's our brother? Where's our sister? Where is our neighbor? We've built up walls and divides. We've separated. And you know what? Throughout the Hebrew Scriptures, or what we would know as the Old Testament, God was so clear that we were to take care of the widow, the orphan, and the stranger. And we were to welcome them in. And Jesus even takes this farther in Matthew 25 when he says, hey, when I was hungry, did you feed me? When I was thirsty, did you give me something to drink? When I was in prison, did you come and visit me? When I was a stranger, did you welcome me in? See, central to what it means to be a disciple of Jesus is to actually be someone who's looking for physical needs. And whether I'm in my bank or the cleaners, whether I'm walking into a restaurant, man, I'm looking. Is there relational needs? Is there physical needs? I met this 8th grader. She's a part of our church. And she had a heart for our world. She had a heart for orphans and this orphanage in Africa. You know what she started to do? She started babysitting. Because she heard that this orphanage needed to raise money so that they could buy a bus. And for 3 years, she took all of the earnings that she made babysitting and put it into an account. And she had accumulated a couple $1,000s, and she actually donated that. And with that money and some other key donors, they were able to buy this. I'm like, that's beautiful. And she's a junior in high school, and she's like, individually, she's like, this is what I can do to help meet a physical need. I don't know if you saw this in the news recently, but there was a couple, and they had a special needs kid, and they were just at a local diner, and their kid just had a really, really difficult time. And for 7 minutes, just had a little bit of an outburst. And some people got really angry and started yelling, like, can you just calm your kid down? And they walked out frustrated. And you can imagine, if you even ever had a child who was crying and freaking out on an airplane, you just panic and you just trying to calm the situation down. And as they're about ready to leave and pay their bill, someone said, the waitress came by and said, your bill was covered, but they left you this note. And it just simply said, hey, we saw you trying. We believe that you are great parents, and we wanted to pay for you, and we will continue to pray for your family. Thanks for staying with your child and loving him well. And I'm like, that's good news. It was such a unique story that it just began to populate on different news outlets. I don't even know if you know this about our church. On Tuesday, over 500 parolees showed up to Willow Creek. There's parole officers, they had badges, and as they walked into the activity center, it looked like this, a whole bunch of people in red shirts and tables, and they called it the Summit of Hope. And what this was an opportunity to give these parolees a fresh start. They went in, they had opportunities to get a job, to meet with employers, they could get a haircut. They met a guy who actually would remove gang tattoos. They actually had a place where you could get fitted for clothes so that when you showed up to the interview, you had something nice to wear. And I went outside, and the line went basically out to the care center, and heads were down. Many of them had never been to a church and never been to our church. And a mom stopped me and said, I have been begging, pleading, praying that my son would step back into a church, and I never thought a church would give my son another chance. And as my friend Mike Foster says, the church at its best is always welcoming and telling people that we are the people of the second chance. And that's what we are. And it's so beautiful and profound to me. And as those people were walking out with a new haircut and some clothes and a job, there was a swagger to some of them. And I was like, this is it. And we were outside, and my friend Ann was just inviting them, saying, hey, you are welcome here. Come. See, every environment that I'm in, I'm looking for a relational need, I'm looking for a physical need, and how can I individually meet it, or how can our church meet it? But the third base, is a global need. This is gonna seem a little bit different. But I have a friend who, I'm a total local guy. I go to certain restaurants, I go to certain places, and I frequent them often. I love my city, and I love my neighborhood. I love where I live, and I love my neighbors. And one of my neighbors, I had just moved into this neighborhood. I hadn't met him. We had just started school, in a new school, and I had been in the West Bank. I was in Israel, I was in Palestine, and he somehow got wind of it. And the first time I met him, he said, hey, I heard that you were in the West Bank. What were you doing there? And I said, I was talking with some real leaders in Israel and in Palestine, and we were just dreaming up peacemaking solutions. And I was learning about the possibilities of peacemaking, and I just believe in it at my core. And he's like, I've never heard of that. And over the next few months, he started printing out articles or bringing the conversation back up, and I realized that in my friend, there was this desire to actually bring good globally. He doesn't go to a church, doesn't have a faith background, but in his heart, he wants to help people. So back up a few months, and Willow's running a 5K. And what's it for? Refugees. The greatest humanitarian crisis of our day. And so I call up my friend and I said, hey, I know you don't run, but you can walk if you want, you can jog, or you can run this 5K at our church, and it's for refugees. And he's like, you guys would do something for refugees? I'm like, yes. There's 4,000 of us gonna run, and I think Bono might even say something, so you might wanna check this out. And and he shows up, first time ever on our campus with his son, and they go through this. And I look at this going, everywhere I go, people have needs, relational. How can I or our church meet them? Physical, how can I or our church meet them? Also global, how can I invite them or our church, give them an opportunity to taste and see God's global heart? And when we do this, man, people get to see what good news is all about. But truth be told, I don't want to leave people stranded on these bases.